Good evening. I'm Melissa Ridgen with your APTN News Weekend. The capital of Nunavut is still in the midst of a water crisis. Iqaluit's water supply has fuel in it, meaning you can't just boil away the problem. Kent Driscoll explains.
The Sylvia Grinnell River has clean water, and you can get here by car from Iqaluit in around 10 minutes. Even when the water's working the way it should, many Iqaluit residents prefer their fresh river water. Most didn't imagine a time where it was the town's only water source. Residents are filling anything that will carry water and bringing it home. The city's plan is similar. They're filling these water trucks right from the river, driving downtown and distributing it to residents. You're supposed to boil the river water for a minute before drinking, which sure beats the piped water right now. The petroleum hydrocarbons in Iqaluit's water can't be removed by boiling. It's so toxic that pregnant women and infants are advised to not even use city water to bathe. These City of Iqaluit workers have been working since 8 a.m. until midnight, since Tuesday, with no let-up in sight. Test results for the water contamination aren't even due until Monday. Iqaluit residents can handle a lot. Major arson, windstorms that peel the roofs off of buildings, blizzards. But this water problem, this is starting to weigh on residents.
Everybody needs a lot of water. We can't drink it. We can't brush our teeth with it. We can't shower our babies with it. We can't wash our dishes. So I guess this probably really puts into perspective how magic having running water is.
I'm surprised Red Cross hasn't come in with a truck or a couple of planes full of water, because this is the time that we really need it. They should be here to help out as well.
It is stressful because I have to wash dishes. Like the tub I have here, it's gonna last an hour actually for us, for both of us, because I'm using it for dishes and I'm using it for the food. So one jug is like good for one supper.
Jugs of water from the south, the government of Nunavut promised, started landing at the airport today. But scenes like this are likely to continue. After all, can you airlift enough clean water to supply a community of over 7,000 people? If you can, how long can you keep it up for? None of these questions have easy answers, but Iqaluit residents are going to have to find out. Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
And officials in Iqaluit are still trying to figure out what exactly caused that fuel in the water problem. Well, a new Winnipeg city bylaw makes it illegal for people to set up camps under or beside bridges. Michelle Carlenzig says how it affects the people that are already living there.
As of October 1st, it's illegal for people in Winnipeg to camp or have fires next to bridges. The move comes after countless fires sparked up over the years. Now, the city says it's unsafe for people to live there. Camp residents say they aren't sure where they'll go next and say the bridge is a safe space.
It doesn't rain under the bridge and it doesn't snow under the bridge, so a little bit of safety, security, I guess, that way.
This gentleman, who used an alias, says city police came this morning to tell him he had a week to find a new home. He says he can't go to shelters because he doesn't have any identification. Homelessness advocates, like CEO Jason Whitford from End Homelessness Winnipeg, say the camps under the bridge are a safety hazard, but there needs to be better long-term solutions.
The greatest need is affordable, safe housing, barrier-free housing that supports individuals that have mental illnesses or that living with addictions. That's one of the biggest need, and there's always been a great need for Indigenous-led resources, approaches, holistic programming that offer healing right within their programming and sensitive to the needs of the realities of Indigenous people, the trauma associated to the past and the life that they've experienced.
The Indigenous population makes up a large portion of the homeless population in Canada, and roughly 70 to 80% are Indigenous, says Whitford. He also says roughly 50% of the homeless people have been exposed to the child welfare system. COVID has only made things worse for the people living on streets, and Whitford says more needs to be done at all levels of society.
We have to do more to kind of meet halfway and address the needs of our most vulnerable population. we have to strategize to help ensure everybody is safe, has a right to housing.
According to End Homelessness Winnipeg, there are roughly 100 homeless camps in Winnipeg right now. The Indigenous organization plans to conduct a street survey this spring to update demographics and data here in the city. Michelle Karlenzig, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Still in Winnipeg, a cab driver here has been charged with extortion and dangerous driving after taking off with an Indigenous woman clinging to the side of his car. This video was posted on Facebook by the woman's friend and shows the driver taking off with her hanging on to the vehicle. The woman told police that she'd paid her fare but forgot her phone in the cab, and the driver allegedly refused to hand it over until she paid him more money, which is the result of the extortion charge there. She said she tried to grab the phone, and that's when the driver took off. She wasn't seriously injured. This is the second incident in a month involving a Winnipeg cab driver and an Indigenous woman that resulted in criminal charges against the drivers. Meanwhile, in Northern Ontario, a man has been charged with dangerous driving after plowing his pickup truck through a homeless camp in Thunder Bay. Thankfully, nobody was injured. Here's Michelle Karlenzig again with that story.
Thanks, Melissa. Last Tuesday, a man drove his pickup truck over a tent at a houseless people's camp in Thunder Bay. Police later confirmed that nobody was in the tent. While police are still investigating the motive, local advocates say that this is nothing new in a city with a history of racism. Lisa Davey is an outreach worker, and she says the roughly 20 people living in the camp were traumatized.
They thought that there was somebody in the tent, and luckily he had, it was just a matter of minutes where he had left his tent to go to Walmart to use the bathroom. So, initially, all of us were feeling just angry about the incident and, and then worrying about the safety and then the mental health of the people that were on site.
Last month, the city planned to build a fence around the area, which meant that the people living there would have to relocate. I spoke with an elder who works with vulnerable people in Thunder Bay. She opposed the fence and even protested against it.
They're willing to spend money to close the gate around it so no homeless people goes in there. They'd rather spend that money to do that than spend money for the homeless people to find shelters for them.
The city backed down and will not follow through with the fence. Mayor Bill Moreau said that he cannot specifically comment on the incident because it's under investigation, but he did say that he reached out to the province of Ontario for additional funding and support for houseless people. Now, nearly 2/3 of Thunder Bay's houseless population is Indigenous. That's about 500 people, according to a 2018 survey. The federal government also came out this year saying that Thunder Bay is a racism hotspot. We'll be following this story as it develops. Back to you, Melissa.
Thanks, Michelle. Well, it's time for us to take a break, but still ahead, the latest from Wet'suwet'en in the fight against a gas pipeline. Stay with us. Welcome back. In northern BC, the Wet'suwet'en pipeline dispute continues with blockades up for the last 2 weeks. Coastal GasLink has an injunction against these blockades. RCMP are on the ground talking with hereditary chiefs, but the protest continues. APTN's Lee Wilson has more.
This is the drill pad site where they plan to drill under Wodzinqua.
Slato, Molly Wickham, spokesperson for the Get 'em Done access point, stands in front of a log cabin built to the drill site for a natural gas pipeline. For 2 weeks, Wet'suwet'en and supporters put up blockades to stop pipeline builder Coastal GasLink from working to pass the pipeline under the Wodzinqua or Maurice River. Jennifer Wickham is media coordinator for the Get 'em Done access point. She says their 5 clans are opposed to the pipeline.
All 5 of our clans have unanimously decided within our backlots, our peace hall, that no pipeline will ever cross our territory. And we want to protect our clean drinking water and our salmon for all the future generations.
Coastal GasLink has an injunction against blockades in the contested area. Last week, the company said they planned a microtunnel under the river, stating that it was deemed the safest way. According to police, there were 2 arrests last week as the blockade started. In an email statement to APTN, An RCMP spokesperson said there were no arrests this week, and officers are in talks with the hereditary chiefs. There is a police presence in the area, and our division liaison team continues to be engaged. Efforts are still ongoing to have discussions with all stakeholders regarding this matter. Gidimt'en Access Point confirmed police have talked to hereditary chief of the Gidimt'en clan, Was, but there have been no talks between the company and the hereditary chiefs. An email statement to APTN News, Coastal GasLink said there are no updates to add to last week's statement, but they are open to find a resolution. Coastal GasLink will continue to keep lines of communication open in an effort to resolve the differences and provide information to address concerns. Wickham says governments and companies need to have free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous people, or protests will keep happening.
It's not just Indigenous people that are standing up and saying that this is not okay. It's non-Indigenous allies and our Canadian citizens are saying that the government needs to be held accountable and be responsible for their actions against Indigenous people.
Wickham says they hope Wet'suwet'en solidarity protests soon start around the country. Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Kitimat.
A Northern Alberta First Nation is building a biorefinery that will help feed its people and make a sizable profit. APTN's Chris Stewart has more.
The Horse Lake First Nation is a small community in northwestern Alberta. They recently broke ground on a biorefinery. That is a refinery that uses biomass like wood for fuel instead of oil and gas. Azar Cameron is the CEO of the Horse Lake First Nation.
This will be a fully integrated biorefinery, one of maybe the first in Canadian landscape, with a focus on year-round greenhouse operations, with the commercial production of biostimulants for agriculture, horticulture, soil reclamation, and reforestation.
That commercial production could generate about $1 million a year in revenue. Biostimulants help plants and trees grow faster. Cameron says the refinery will be carbon neutral and will benefit the community with vegetables from the greenhouse.
The greenhouse, the food produced over there is a bonus for the communities, and it's just, and even then after that, there will be more energy than we can use, which can then be channeled into all kinds of other energy uses, including if you want to heat another building, for example, or maybe just add another greenhouse.
Cameron says the refinery will produce some employment as well.
Community is certainly excited about it. There's a lot of interest. It creates jobs. It creates permanent jobs as well as seasonal jobs. For the seasonal jobs will be for the biomass.
It is expected to be fully operational in January. Cameron says he hopes to expand in the near future. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
A school division in Winnipeg is taking school police officers out of its schools and replacing them with a new diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism program. Daryl Stranger explains how it's supposed to work.
This week, the Louis Riel School Division put an end to the School Resource Officer Program, which had one Winnipeg police officer working across the division's 40 schools since 2016. Feedback from staff, students, and families, including BIPOC students feeling uneasy with the presence of an officer around, led the school division to use the resources for the SRO program on a new diversity and anti-racism initiative.
Whether they identify as Indigenous or as a person of color, and no matter their socioeconomic circumstance, that we not see the gaps that we see at present when it comes to learning outcomes, that we not see the differences that we see when we look at well-becoming, when we look at what kids are telling us about how they're feeling, how they're doing, how they feel anxious, how they feel in terms of their sense of belonging.
LRSD priorities include implementing a curriculum review emphasizing anti-racism and decolonization, and adding an anti-racism education office.
That overarching policy will guide actions in many areas, starting with professional learning, we really need to develop a curriculum for staff that focuses on the issues and focuses on anti-racism, decolonization.
They are also working with organizations like the Community Education Development Association, which serves Winnipeg students and families, teachers, and school administration.
Just from a curriculum standpoint, things that continue to bring in other voices, other authors, other historical narratives that accurately represent Indigenous history. And then from a BIPOC standpoint of Black, Indigenous, and peoples of color, again, at the levels of decision making at the board and otherwise, how the community can have its voice better represented by folks that are present at those tables.
Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Well, it's time for another break, but when we come back, a popular music festival held at a former residential school site in Quebec. Now organizers are wondering if it holds unmarked graves. Stay with us. It's been 5 decades now that the Notre Dame residential school in Manawatu, Quebec has been closed. It's the site where that is now located or used for a popular annual music festival. But with the remains of missing children being found all over former residential school sites around the country, some are wondering if any secrets might be lurking under the ground. A story by Sylvie Ambrose is here narrated by Lindsay Richardson.
The annual Inuunigamu Music Festival is beloved by the people of Manawatu. For nearly 40 years, the annual festival held here has been a source of joy. But for all the good times, it's never far from people's minds that this location is the site of a former residential school. Daniel Fontaine of Manawatu is a residential school survivor. He says he's mostly healed from his time at the local Notre Dame school, but still finds talking about it difficult. He says he witnessed repeated injustices. Despite the difficult times he had at the school, he says prayer helps him from dwelling on the past. But Fontaine was shaken by recent announcements of remains of children being found on former residential school sites across the country. The Notre Dame residential school closed its doors in 1970. There's been talk about searching the grounds there.
De permettre à ce site-là de fleurir, c'est un symbole extrêmement fort de résilience et de résistance pacifique.
Kevin Bacon-Hervieux is the coordinator for the Inuunigamu Festival. He says the festival was created by former students of Notre Dame. This year, it was held online due to the pandemic. He adds that whatever happens, the festival will continue to serve as a way for the community to heal.
Il y a énormément de personnes qui ont décidé de créer ce festival-là et de l'organiser à chaque année. Et ça a fait en sorte que ce que ça représente pour les gens de ma génération, ce site-là, c'est pas le pensionnat, c'est le festival, c'est courir partout avec nos amis, c'est de voir des spectacles.
According to community leaders, the plan to search the site will be revealed later this fall. A story by Sylvie Ambrose, APTN National News, Manawatu, Quebec.
Multimedia artist Jay Sewell's work is about the angst of Indigenous people, something his creative new art exhibit certainly portrays, as it spills both shock and truth onto the streets of Toronto. As Annette Francis tells us, it's a big pile of history.
It's not every day that you would see a massive stack of buffalo skulls sitting in downtown Toronto like this. It's a creation by Chippewa artist Jay Soul. It's called Built on Genocide.
The idea behind it was to create awareness around the first kind of known genocide that was perpetrated by the Canadian government to Indigenous people, and first and foremost starting with the slaughtering of the bison in the prairies as a means of a military tactic to dispossess Indigenous people of their lands and the ability to clothe themselves, house themselves, and feed themselves.
Soul's outdoor exhibit is presented by the Luminato Festival at Toronto's Harbourfront Centre. The idea came from a research project he was working on 5 years ago.
I came across these old photos of these giant buffalo mounds of skulls and bones in these massive piles, and as I sort of dug into the research behind that, there was a connection to John A.'s MacDonald's executive order to do that in the prairies as a means of a military tactic. Within the Canadian history books, it's sort of it's lied about. It's saying it was for the expansion of the railroad and for land for settler to set up settler homes and farms.
Matt Pereira is visiting from Vancouver. He came downtown specifically to see this. He says it's powerful.
I think it paints a really good statement that we are built on the lives of Indigenous people. There's a lot of reconciliation that still needs to happen, and especially in the wake of the Truth and Reconciliation Day happening on the 30th. I think this is a really important message.
Surrounding the installation are 20 images that Soul created to highlight the continued devastation on Indigenous peoples. Tanya Bruce says it's a brutal honesty that needs to be talked about.
I think this is really important for Canadians to see it this way. I think we require and we demand that the story is always told in a way that is comforting to us, and I appreciate that it's no longer being made comfortable for us, and I don't think it should be made comfortable, and if we are uncomfortable, then maybe we should do something about why we're so uncomfortable with our history.
For anyone interested in seeing the exhibition, it's free and runs until October 24th. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Toronto.
Well, that is your APTN News Weekend. Thanks, of course, to you for joining us. If you missed anything through the week, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca, and you can catch up. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Have a great weekend.